Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are unpacking every layer of the incredible novel, Frankenstein. Get ready for a deep dive into its characters, themes, and the hidden meanings behind the story.
It's such a foundational text, isn't it? More than just the monster movies.
Absolutely. This isn't just a tale of a monster, it's a profound exploration of ambition, responsibility, and the very essence of what it means to be human.
Exactly.
We're going on a journey, peeling back the layers of one of literature's most iconic and haunting tales. And trust me, it's a story that's just as chilling and thought-provoking today as it was when it first shocked readers.
It really stays with you.
Okay, let's really get into this.
Indeed, and to truly understand Frankenstein, we have to go right back to its genesis, starting with Mary Shelley herself.
Right, the origin story.
What's utterly fascinating here is how the real-life circumstances surrounding its creation feel almost as dramatic and intense as the novel's plot itself, blurring the lines between creation and lived experience.
Absolutely. The origin story is a deep dive in itself. Shelley, in her own introduction to the novel, tells us she had an early inclination to write stories, scribbling them as a child.
From a young age.
But here's where it becomes genuinely interesting for me. She admits her waking dreams were more fantastic and agreeable than my writings.
Yeah, that's quite a confession, isn't it?
It suggests this incredibly rich, almost untamed inner world, far more vivid than anything she initially managed to capture on paper. It's as if her imagination needed a truly shocking catalyst to be fully unleashed.
It's a wonderful, almost raw insight into her psyche, isn't it? She saw these dreams as a refuge, her deepest pleasure, especially when she felt free from the constraints of others' expectations.
Right.
This internal wellspring of creativity, this untamed imaginative power, is absolutely key to understanding the sheer force behind Frankenstein. It wasn't a dry intellectual exercise. It was deeply personal.
And then we arrive at that famously bleak summer of 1816, often referred to as the wet, ungenial summer.
A year without a summer, basically. Volcanic ash, terrible weather.
Exactly. Mary, her husband Percy Shelley, and the notoriously dramatic Lord Byron were confined indoors in Switzerland because of incessant rain. What do?
Well, what else?
They passed the time by reading German ghost stories translated into French, a perfect setting for something macabre to brew.
Precisely. And these weren't just any spooky tales. Shelley specifically mentions the history of the inconstant lover, where a man expecting to embrace his bride finds himself in the arms of a pale ghost he had deserted.
Ooh, chilling. Betrayal and retribution.
Yeah, a chilling tale of betrayal and ghostly retribution. Then there's the even more unsettling narrative of the sinful founder of a family line, whose miserable doom was to bestow the kiss of death on all the younger sons, causing them to wither like snapped flowers.
Wow, some really dark stuff.
These aren't just jump scares. They're stories steeped in psychological horror, generational curses, and the consequences of past sins, clearly setting a very specific dark atmosphere for their creative challenge.
And what was that challenge? Lord Byron, ever the instigator, declares, "We will each write a ghost story."
The famous challenge.
A challenge that Mary Shelley, surprisingly, initially struggles with. She experiences a blank incapability of invention. Imagine that. The mind that would conjure Frankenstein feeling utterly blank. It's almost a cruel irony.
This struggle is quite significant because, as Shelley herself observes, true invention isn't about conjuring something from absolute nothingness. It's about shaping and molding existing ideas, letting them germinate.
Right. Building on something.
The real breakthrough for her didn't come from forcing it, but from a philosophical discussion with Byron and Percy Shelley. They were talking about the principle of life, the possibility of discovering and communicating it, even mentioning Dr. Darwin's experiments and their implications.
Erasmus Darwin, yeah. Grandfather of Charles.
That's a one. This intellectual debate provided the scientific scaffolding her nightmare needed.
And what a breakthrough it was. This is where her own narrative takes a truly chilling turn, leading to the ultimate moment of creative inspiration. A waking dream, a nightmare that finally gave her the story.
The core image.
She describes it with such visceral detail. A student of unhallowed arts kneeling beside the thing he had put together. But then, the horrifying moment. The hideous phantasm of a man standing at his bedside, opening his curtains and looking on him with yellow, watery but speculative eyes.
Ugh, those eyes. Speculative, that's the word that always gets me. It implies thought, awareness.
Exactly. This image, this profound terror, was the absolute spark. She felt compelled, almost haunted, to write a story that would frighten my reader as I myself had been frightened. That raw personal horror becomes the very soul of the novel.
It's a powerful testament to the transgressive power of art, a direct, almost involuntary translation of personal terror into creation.
Yeah.
She initially conceived it as just a short tale, perhaps a chilling vignette.
Just a little ghost story.
Right. But it was Percy Shelley who recognized its profound potential and urged her to develop the idea at greater length. This push, this belief in its deeper resonance, transformed a terrifying dream into a sprawling, complex novel.
Thank goodness for Percy, then.
Well, yes. Yeah. And importantly, the preface, which was actually written by Percy Shelley.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, he wrote the first preface. It also notes that Dr. Darwin and other physiological writers considered such an event not of impossible occurrence.
Ah, grounding it in science, or pseudoscience of the day.
Exactly. This immediately elevates the story beyond a mere ghost tale, grounding its fantastical elements in a pseudoscientific possibility, aiming to delineate human passions more comprehensive and commanding than simple specters.
So it's about human psychology, not just spooky stuff.
Precisely. It raises a fascinating question. How much did contemporary scientific thought, its boundless optimism and nascent ethical questions, truly influence her vision for this story?
Okay, so the stage is perfectly set for a truly unsettling journey into the heart of ambition and its terrifying consequences. Let's now dive into the narrative itself, which begins not with our titular scientist, but with letter one, Robert Walton's Arctic ambition.
The framing device. Very important.
Our first encounter is with Robert Walton, an Arctic explorer writing to his sister, Mrs. Seville, from St. Petersburg and Archangel. He's driven by an almost feverish, restless ambition.
What's immediately striking here is how Walton's fervent desire to explore the North Pole establishes a foundational theme of dangerous, perhaps even reckless ambition that directly mirrors Victor's later on.
Parallel characters right from the start.
Absolutely. He doesn't just see it as a scientific endeavor. It's a region of beauty and delight, a romantic quest for glory. His daydreams about this pursuit have become more fervent and vivid, almost consuming him.
It sounds almost like an obsession already.
It does. This immediately signals to the listener that the story isn't just about a monster, but about the profound danger of unchecked human desire and the isolation that often accompanies it.
He confesses to his sister that he's self-educated, his mind fired by reading Voyages of Discovery from his Uncle Thomas's library.
A classic autodidact.
He even harbored poetic aspirations, dreaming of a niche in the temple where the names of Homer and Shakespeare are consecrated, but he heavily bore the disappointment of failing.
Ah, the failed poet trope. Common back then.
So, in a way, the North Pole becomes his new grand poem, a compensatory drive for past failures. He's seeking a kind of immortality through discovery.
And his preparation for this expedition speaks volumes about his character. He spent 6 years inuring his body to hardship, hiring himself as an undermate in a Greenland whaler, enduring cold, famine, thirst, and want of sleep.
Wow, that's dedication. Or maybe something else.
He worked harder than common sailors, devoting his nights to studying mathematics, medicine, and physical science. This extreme level of self-discipline, while admirable on the surface, also hints at an obsessive drive, a singular focus that will resonate chillingly with Victor Frankenstein's own dedication.
He genuinely believes this expedition is his favorite dream of my early years, a pursuit of glory over ease and luxury. He asks his sister, "Do I not deserve to accomplish some great purpose?"
That sense of entitlement, almost.
Oh.
I've suffered, so I deserve this.
Exactly. Already hinting at this dangerous idea of deserving success for his efforts, no matter the personal cost or potential hubris, he's almost challenging fate.
If we connect this to the broader narrative frame, Walton's opening letters are absolutely crucial. They introduce the idea of grand, almost superhuman ambition, the allure of the unknown, and the profound loneliness of a driven individual who sacrifices everything for their quest.
Like Victor will.
Precisely. He explicitly states that he feels a cold northern breeze that braces my nerves and fills me with delight, seeing it as a tangible foretaste of the icy climes he's advancing towards. It's a powerful foreshadowing of the desolate, isolated landscapes, both physical and emotional, that will define Victor's story.
And as we move into letter 2 and 3, a sense of isolation and progress, Walton's longing for companionship really becomes poignant amidst his relentless pursuit.
Yes, this is key.
He writes of the slowly passing time, surrounded by frost and snow, feeling that being self-educated is an evil, precisely because he lacks a cultivated as well as of a capacious mind to share his thoughts with, someone who could repair the faults of your poor brother.
His words, "I bitterly feel the want of a friend," are quite moving, aren't they?
They really are. It humanizes him.
This deep desire for intellectual and emotional companionship sets up a striking contrast with Victor's later self-imposed isolation and provides a compelling reason for Walton to listen so intently to Frankenstein's tale.
He needs a friend, and along comes Victor.
Exactly. The voyage itself progresses, with the ship passing floating sheets of ice, but also experiencing a renovating warmth from southern gales. Despite the coming difficulties and the increasing severity of the winter, Walton's resolution remains steadfast. He's a man committed to his vision, even if it brings profound loneliness.
Then comes letter 4, the encounter in the ice, and this is where the story truly shifts gears and begins its dark, dramatic unraveling.
The plot kicks in.
Walton recounts a strange sight, a sledge drawn by dogs with a being which had the shape of a man, but apparently of gigantic stature, traveling northward.
Our first glimpse.
It's the first hint of the supernatural, or at least the deeply uncanny.
This is our first mysterious glimpse of the creature, shrouded in the desolate Arctic landscape, appearing almost supernatural in its environment. The description immediately establishes its otherness, an immense scale, a stark, powerful image against the icy backdrop.
That giant figure in the ice.
Yeah.
Very memorable.
It's a deliberate choice by Shelley to introduce the creature before Victor, building immediate intrigue and a sense of the unknown.
The very next morning, they find another sledge adrift on an ice fragment with only one dog still alive. And there, on the brink of destruction, is an emaciated man, Victor Frankenstein.
The second figure.
Here's a crucial, almost defiant moment that immediately reveals Victor's character. On the verge of death, he refuses to come aboard until he knows the ship's direction. North. Always north.
Driven even at death's door.
And his immediate question, when asked why he was so far on the ice, is chilling. To seek one who fled from me? This instantly hooks you. Who is this man? And who is he pursuing with such a relentless, desperate fervor in this desolate, icy wilderness?
This exchange immediately hooks us, and Walton's growing admiration for Victor is palpable despite the man's broken state. He describes him as gentle, yet so wise, with a cultivated mind and unparalleled eloquence even in his profound misery.
A wreck, but a noble wreck.
Victor's shattered spirit yet noble demeanor draws Walton in, making him want to know this extraordinary man's story. It creates this very human connection in an inhuman landscape.
And finally, Victor decides to tell his strange and harrowing story. What's so poignant here is that he's motivated by Walton's own thirst for knowledge and wisdom.
He sees a kindred spirit, or maybe a warning sign.
It's almost as if Victor sees a younger, less jaded version of himself in Walton, and perhaps hopes to prevent him from making similar catastrophic mistakes. He's passing on a warning, a cautionary tale, directly from its tormented creator to another ambitious seeker of the unknown.
This creates a fascinating narrative frame where we, the listeners, like Walton, become the direct recipients of this profound and tragic tale.
We're Walton now.
Right. It raises an important question right from the start. Is Victor telling his story to absolve himself, to warn Walton away from similar intellectual hubris, or simply to alleviate his own unbearable burden by finally confiding in someone?
Maybe all three.
Very possibly. It implies a certain desperation for understanding, even from a stranger.
Exactly. And now let's journey into Victor Frankenstein's own words, his ascent into scientific obsession, and his ultimate devastating fall. We begin with Chapter 1, A Blessed Childhood.
Back to the beginning.
Victor describes his family as prestigious and well-respected Genovese citizens. His father, a man of honor, rescued his mother, Caroline Beaufort, from a life of poverty after her own proud merchant father fell into ruin and died. It paints a picture of benevolence and virtue right from the start.
This initial depiction is one of almost idyllic domesticity and deep, unconditional love, emphasizing the immense affection Victor received from his parents.
Spoiled, maybe?
Well, certainly cherished. This context is incredibly important because it highlights the stark contrast with the utter misery and desolation that will later engulf him. It sets a baseline of what Victor had before his ambition consumed him.
And then we have the introduction of Elizabeth Lavenza. Caroline, Victor's mother, finds this radiant girl in a poor cottage in Italy amidst other children. Elizabeth is a creature who seemed to shed radiance, described as fairer than a pictured cherub.
Almost too perfect. Angelic.
His mother adopts her as a present for him, destined to be his more-than-sister and future wife.
That present line is a bit odd, isn't it? Possessive?
It is a little strange, yeah. It's almost a fairy tale beginning, isn't it? A foundling brought into a perfect family, a gift for the cherished son.
It truly is a picture of domestic perfection. The Frankenstein family is painted as a paragon of virtue and benevolence, particularly Caroline, who acts as a guardian angel to the afflicted, remembering her own past.
So a loving upbringing. No excuses there for what comes later.
Well, that's the argument, isn't it? This idealized, almost utopian setting makes Victor's subsequent corruption and suffering all the more tragic, suggesting that even from the most loving and privileged beginnings, one can deviate severely through unchecked ambition and a disregard for natural order. It's a stark contrast to the monster's later experience of rejection.
Moving into Chapter 2, The Seeds of Obsession, we see the contrasting dispositions of Victor, Elizabeth, and their childhood friend, Henry Clerval.
The three companions.
Elizabeth is calm, appreciating nature's beauty and the poetical part of the world. Henry is imaginative, deeply loves literature, and dreams of valor and chivalry. But Victor.
Victor.
He confesses to an ardent thirst for knowledge, a burning desire to investigate their causes. He wants to divine the world's deepest secrets, not just admire them.
This is a critical distinction, and is where we start to see Victor's tragic flaw take root. His curiosity isn't a gentle appreciation. It's an intense, almost insatiable longing to penetrate nature's hidden laws, to understand the physical secrets of the world.
The forbidden knowledge itch.
Exactly. This initial intellectual curiosity is presented as a neutral, perhaps even positive trait at first, but Shelley subtly shows us how it evolves into something far more dangerous, bordering on obsession.
His early fascination leans heavily towards outdated alchemists like Cornelius Agrippa, Paracelsus, and Albertus Magnus.
The old guard. Magic and science blurring.
He pores over their works not just for theoretical understanding, but with dreams of immense power of banishing disease from the human frame and even raising ghosts. He's drawn to the magical, the miraculous, the promise of transcending human limits.
His father dismisses these early studies as sad trash, but perhaps too carelessly.
Yeah, just laughs it off.
His cursory glance did not assure Victor that he truly understood the contents, allowing Victor's dangerous fascination to persist unchecked. What's fascinating here is that while these figures are now considered pseudoscientific, in Victor's time, the line between alchemy and nascent chemistry was still fluid.
So it wasn't totally crazy back then.
Not entirely. This shows Victor is initially drawn to a path that promises grand, almost godlike results rather than rigorous observable science. He desires to command nature, not just to understand it.
Then comes a pivotal moment, a truly formative experience when Victor is about 15. He witnesses the most violent and terrible thunderstorm that utterly shatters a magnificent oak tree, reducing it to thin ribbons of wood.
Nature's raw power, a key romantic image.
It's an act of profound, raw, natural destruction. A man of great research then explains electricity, and Victor's perspective shifts dramatically. He despises his old alchemical pursuits, seeing them as sad trash, and turns to the modern masters of natural philosophy. It's a moment of scientific conversion.
This incident is a crucial turning point for him. It shows him the immense, almost terrifying, destructive power of nature and how scientific explanation can demystify what once seemed magical.
Science seems more powerful now.
Right. But crucially, his underlying desire for power doesn't diminish. It merely shifts focus to a new, more effective methodology. He is still seeking to command nature's secrets, just through different, more potent means.
The goal's the same, just the tools change.
Precisely. This raises a key question for the entire novel. Was it the knowledge itself that was dangerous, or Victor's inherent ambition and the way he chose to pursue that knowledge?
And that leads him to Chapter 3, The Path to Ingolstadt. At age 17, Victor prepares for the University of Ingolstadt, eager for new intellectual challenges.
Off to university, a classic start to a downfall story.
But before he leaves, what he calls the first misfortune of my life occurs, an omen, as it were, of my future misery. His adopted sister, Elizabeth, catches scarlet fever. His beloved mother, Caroline, nurses her back to health, but tragically succumbs to the illness herself. Her dying wish is for Victor and Elizabeth to marry, a final, loving request that unwittingly places an immense burden on him.
This is a devastating blow, and it deeply plants the seeds of future tragedy. His mother's dying wish, though born of love and a desire for their happiness, adds an immense unspoken expectation onto Victor, especially given the dark path he's about to embark upon.
Losing his mother right before leaving. That's rough.
The loss of his mother, the nurturing heart of his family, and the embodiment of compassion arguably removes a critical grounding force in his life, leaving him more susceptible to his own intellectual excesses.
And there's a small but significant detail here. Henry Clerval's hopes of joining Victor at university are dashed because his narrow-minded traitor, father, sees idleness and ruin in his son's academic aspirations.
Poor Clerval, stuck behind a desk.
Henry is confined to commerce, a stark contrast to Victor's burgeoning intellectual freedom, setting up their later dynamic.
This amplifies Victor's sense of unique intellectual destiny and, ironically, further isolates him from a grounded, humane perspective. At Ingolstadt, he initially encounters M. Kremp, a gruff natural philosophy professor who bluntly rejects his alchemical studies, telling him his fancies are 1,000 years old and as musty as they are ancient.
Not exactly welcoming.
This dismissal initially reinforces Victor's disdain for modern science, but it also provides a challenge for his intellectual pride, pushing him to prove his worth.
But then another professor, M. Waldman, delivers a chemistry lecture that profoundly impacts Victor.
The charismatic professor.
Waldman speaks of modern chemists who mimic the earthquake and mock the invisible world with its own shadows, hinting at a power that rivals nature itself. Victor is completely captivated, seeing these as the words of fate announced to destroy me.
Wow, he knows.
This self-aware premonition is chilling. This lecture truly begins his descent, inspiring him to pioneer a new way, explore unknown powers, and unfold to the world the deepest mysteries of creation.
What's truly fascinating here is Victor's immediate and almost prophetic recognition that these words are announced to destroy me. He's aware, on some deep subconscious level, that he's stepping onto a dangerous, perhaps even blasphemous path.
But he does it anyway.
Yet his ambition, his ardor, is so overwhelming that he cannot resist. It's a classic Faustian bargain, playing out the idea of trading one's peace, one's humanity, perhaps even one's soul, for forbidden knowledge and ultimate power. He's warned, he knows the stakes, yet he plunges forward anyway, willingly.
And indeed, in Chapter 4, unhallowed arts, natural philosophy and chemistry become Victor's sole occupation.
Down the rabbit hole.
He dedicates himself with unremitting ardor, neglecting his friends and family, working so intensely that the stars often disappeared in the light of morning while he was still in his laboratory. This is the portrait of a man consumed.
This single-minded focus, while leading to rapid progress and admiration from his professors, simultaneously marks his complete withdrawal from human connection in the natural world.
Totally isolated.
It's a powerful foreshadowing of the profound isolation that will define his tragic future. His progress is so swift that within 2 years, he makes discoveries that earn him great esteem, yet this only fuels his relentless, singular inquiries, pushing him further into dangerous territory.
His studies lead him to focus on the causes of life, which, paradoxically, requires him to delve into natural decay and corruption.
The dark side of biology.
He spends days and nights immersed in the macabre, frequenting vaults and charnel houses, observing how the human form is degraded and wasted by death, how the worm inherited the wonders of the eye and brain.
Grim stuff. You can see why people were shocked.
He's literally immersing himself in the grim reality of mortality to understand the spark of life.
This grotesque preparation highlights the morally ambiguous and transgressive nature of his pursuit. He's not just observing, he's internalizing the processes of death and decomposition, seeing them as a means to understand and ultimately to command life.
Crossing lines. Big time.
This raises an important question about the ethics of scientific exploration. Does the pursuit of knowledge justify any means, no matter how horrifying or unnatural? He's clearly crossing a line here, driven by a boundless, almost maniacal curiosity.
And then, the chilling discovery. He becomes capable of bestowing animation upon lifeless matter.
The secret is unlocked.
This is it. He hesitates, but an ardent, even frantic impulse drives him to create a being, his stated goal, to renew life where death had apparently devoted the body to corruption. He truly believes he can overcome death itself, becoming a godlike creator.
This is the absolute peak of his hubris, a moment of profound moral blindness. The idea of becoming a father to a new generation of beings, deserving gratitude more completely than any natural parent, illustrates his self-aggrandizing vision.
He really thinks he'll be worshipped for this.
He does. His toil is loathsome, marked by a slow fever and extreme nervousness, causing him to shun fellow creatures. He convinces himself that once completed, exercise and amusement would drive away incipient disease. a truly childish delusion that suggests he severely underestimates the profound consequences of his actions.
Yeah, just take a break afterwards. Everything will be fine.
Right. He's so lost in his ambition, he's forgotten his humanity.
So after all this unhallowed toil, this obsessive immersion in the secrets of life and death, we arrive at Chapter 5, The Monster Born.
The moment of truth or horror?
It's the night of November, dark and stormy, and Victor finally witnesses the convulsive motion that animates his creation, the very climax of his unholy endeavor.
And here's the truly devastating turning point, the tragic irony. Instead of the beautiful being he intended, the new species that would bless him as its creator.
It's not beautiful.
Not at all. Victor is immediately filled with visceral horror at its appearance. Beautiful, great God, his yellow skin scarcely covered the work of muscles and arteries beneath, his watery eyes, his shriveled complexion and straight black lips. The luxuriances he had designed now form a more horrid contrast on this grotesque figure.
He chose the best features, but the sum is monstrous.
Exactly. The moment the creature opens its yellow, watery but speculative eyes that hint at an inner world and inflict Victor is utterly repulsed.
He runs.
He immediately abandons his creation, rushing from the apartment, fleeing the miserable monster whom I had created. This act of abandonment, this profound rejection of his own offspring, is the first and arguably most crucial transgression.
The creator rejects his creation instantly.
He then falls into a nervous fever, haunted by what he has done, plunged into a nightmare of his own making.
Serves him right, maybe.
Well, it's certainly the consequence. This reaction horror, disgust, and immediate abandonment is the fundamental sin of the creator in this story. He cannot bear the reality of his own success, or rather, the stark difference between his ideal and the horrifying reality.
The dream versus the reality.
The creature's initial lack of articulation and Victor's immediate disgust prevent any communication or understanding, setting the stage for all future tragedy. It's a primal wound inflicted by the creator on his creation that will fester and poison everything.
Fortunately for Victor, in Chapter 6, a glimmer of recovery, his kind and compassionate friend, Henry Clerval, arrives in Ingolstadt.
Good old Clerval. The cavalry arrives,
completely restoring Victor to health and reminding him of simple human kindness. During his delirium, Victor raves incessantly about the monster, but Henry, thankfully, initially believes it to be the wanderings of a disturbed imagination.
Henry Clerval acts as a crucial foil to Victor, representing compassion, human connection, and a love for the moral relations of things and the beauty of nature.
Everything Victor seems to have forgotten.
His presence pulls Victor back from the brink of madness, symbolizing the restorative power of genuine human companionship. Victor's slow convalescence, noting the return of spring and the divine season, signifies a temporary return to sanity and appreciation for nature's simple beauty, a glimpse of the life he could still have if he chose connection over isolation.
Elizabeth also sends a heartfelt letter, expressing her worry and sharing familial news, including concerns about Ernest and local gossip.
A connection back home.
This brings a temporary gush of tears of joy to Victor, a rare moment of genuine, unburdened connection to his past life. He even engages in renewed literary pursuits with Clerval, studying Persian, Arabic, and Sanskrit languages, desperately trying to escape his grim thoughts and re-engage with something wholesome.
Victor describes Clerval's gentleness and affection as warming and opening his senses, making him the same happy creature again. This chapter truly emphasizes the profound importance of human connection and the restorative power of nature in nurturing well-being.
But it won't last, will it?
No. Themes that are constantly battling against Victor's isolated, destructive ambition. It's a fleeting period of peace and warmth, a brief respite before the inevitable storm of consequences begins to break over his life.
And the storm does indeed come, and it hits hard in Chapter 7, William's tragic fate. Victor, eager to finally return to Geneva, receives a letter from his father.
The dreaded letter.
With a truly horrifying and devastating revelation, William is dead. He is murdered. William is Victor's youngest brother, a sweet, innocent child. It's the first direct, brutal ripple effect of his creation.
This is the first direct and devastating consequence of Victor's abandonment. The murder is attributed to an unseen force, a monster, but Victor immediately knows who the real culprit
His
is.
stomach must have just dropped.
Elizabeth is particularly distressed, feeling profound self-accusation because a valuable miniature of Caroline, their mother, that William had been wearing, is now missing. The evidence points to a robbery, but Victor knows better.
As Victor hurries home, a violent storm rages near Geneva with vivid flashes of lightning. And here's the major turning point, the chilling confirmation of his worst fears.
He sees him.
In a blinding flash of lightning near the murder scene, Victor sees the gigantic figure of the creature. He has an instant, chilling, and absolute conviction. It was the wretch, the filthy demon to whom I had given life, and the murderer of my brother. The sight confirms his nightmare is real.
This moment of terrifying recognition is absolutely pivotal. Victor confronts the horrifying reality of his creation's existence and its capacity for malice.
Yeah.
But crucially, in a decision that compounds the tragedy,
He keeps quiet.
he makes a fatal choice to remain silent. He fears he would be seen as a madman and be utterly unable to prove the creature's existence or implicate him. This silence, this failure to take responsibility, allows the tragedy to continue, spiraling into further injustice.
And it does, because his brother, Ernest, then reveals another devastating detail. The murderer discovered. Justine Moritz, a beloved servant in the Frankenstein household, known for her goodness and loyalty, has been accused.
Oh, Justine, the tragic scapegoat.
The missing miniature, the very piece of evidence, was found in her pocket. The evidence seems damning, but Victor knows it's a setup.
This brings us to Chapter 8. Justine's innocence sacrificed. Victor is consumed by agony, absolutely certain of Justine's innocence. He cries out, "Justine, poor good Justine is innocent," knowing the terrible truth that implicates him.
But he can't say anything, or won't.
Right. Justine's calm demeanor at trial, despite her extreme confusion of manner, paradoxically feels suspicion rather than dispelling it. Her alibi involving staying at her aunt's house, being disturbed by a noise, then wandering to search for William and returning to the city gates after they closed, is convoluted and easily dismissed.
Sounds flimsy, even if true.
She becomes a tragic victim of circumstance and misinterpretation, a horrific irony given the actual murderer is lurking unseen.
And here's a truly heartbreaking twist of fate. Justine is coerced into confessing to avoid excommunication, despite her innocence.
The pressure from the priest, awful.
She explicitly states, "I did confess, but I confessed a falsehood," because she was told it was the only way to avoid eternal damnation. It speaks volumes about the societal pressures and the rigid, unforgiving nature of the legal and religious institutions of the time, where truth can be sacrificed for appearances and a false sense of salvation.
Elizabeth, ever the compassionate soul, delivers a passionate, eloquent defense of Justine, detailing her admirable character and care for others, appealing to the judge's favorable interpretation. She embodies true justice and empathy here.
It's a lone voice of reason.
But the public, swayed by the circumstantial evidence and the coerced confession, tragically turns against Justine, charging her with the blackest ingratitude. Victor is overwhelmed by profound guilt and remorse, feeling the fangs of remorse tore my bosom.
He knows it's his fault.
Justine is found guilty and cruelly executed. Victor's suffering here is immense because he recognizes that he is the true murderer, that his actions, his creation and subsequent abandonment and his silence led directly to Justine's wrongful death.
The weight of that, unbearable.
This raises a fundamental question about accountability. How much responsibility does a creator bear for the actions of their creation, especially when they neglect or reject it?
In Chapter 9, A Soul in Torment, Victor falls into a state of dead calmness of inaction and certainty after Justine's death. It's not peace, but an overwhelming despair and remorse that makes sleep flee from his eyes.
Numbness.
Shock. He wanders like an evil spirit, convinced he has committed deeds of mischief beyond description, horrible. His world has become a living hell.
This marks a profound, almost irreversible shift for Victor. His guilt becomes all-consuming, an inescapable hell within me which nothing could extinguish.
His father tries to help.
His father attempts to console him, urging him to overcome immoderate grief for the sake of the survivors, for Elizabeth and Ernest. But Victor's remorse is too deep to be assuaged by such simple advice. He feels that remorse mingled its bitterness and terror its alarm with my other sensations, a cocktail of unbearable agony.
Victor retreats to Bellerive, seeking solitude in nature, a place that once brought him peace. But even there, he's haunted by the daily fear that the creature would perpetrate some new wickedness.
No escape, not even in nature now.
He has an obscure feeling that all was not over, a chilling premonition of further horror.
This ongoing dread is a profound psychological torment for Victor. He knows the creature is out there, a living embodiment of his catastrophic ambition, an untamed force unleashed upon the world, and he anticipates further destruction. His abhorrence of this fiend cannot be exceeded, and yet he knows, deep down, that a confrontation is not just inevitable, but necessary if he is ever to find a moment of peace.
Which brings us to Chapter 10, the confrontation on Montanvert. Driven by his torment, Victor journeys into the majestic, savage, and enduring scenes of the Alps, specifically the valley of Chamonix,
The sublime landscape. Perfect for a showdown.
hoping to find solace and weep no more amidst their vastness and stark beauty.
This setting, with its immense glaciers, towering peaks, and overwhelming sense of the sublime, provides a fitting and dramatic backdrop for the long-anticipated encounter. Nature, for Victor, has always been a source of both delight and scientific inquiry, but now it offers a stark, almost unforgiving beauty that mirrors his own internal desolation.
It's an epic stage.
It's the kind of epic stage a confrontation of this magnitude deserves.
And then, the dramatic, almost inevitable encounter. Nearing the top of Montanvert, he sees the creature approaching him with superhuman speed, bounding over crevices, a terrifying figure amidst the ice and snow.
What's truly striking here is the sheer physicality and unnatural agility of the creature's approach. It's not a mere phantom. It's a powerful, almost preternatural being, capable of navigating this treacherous terrain with an ease that highlights its non-human nature.
Unsettlingly graceful, almost.
The contrast between Victor's human frailties and the creature's formidable presence is palpable.
Victor's reaction is immediate, uncontrollable rage. He calls the creature abhorred monster, fiend that thou art, and threatens to extinguish the spark he so negligently bestowed.
Pure fury.
He springs at him, ready for mortal combat, consumed by hatred and a desperate desire for vengeance.
But the creature easily eludes Victor, demonstrating its superior strength. And then, in a truly shocking and pivotal turn, it responds with surprising calm and profound eloquence.
This is the big surprise, right? He can talk. And how?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Be calm. I entreat you to hear me. I was benevolent and good. Misery made me a fiend. Make me happy, and I shall again be virtuous. This is a crucial moment, as it completely shatters Victor's expectation of a simple, inarticulate brute, revealing a complex, suffering being.
Victor, initially refusing, absolutely seething with rage, is eventually swayed by sheer curiosity and a growing, grudging sense of a creator's duties towards his creature.
That flicker of responsibility, finally.
He reluctantly agrees to listen to the creature's story. So, what does this all mean for us, the listener? It means we're about to hear the creature's perspective, a voice that has been silenced, rejected, and maligned, finally given its chance to explain itself.
This agreement marks a dramatic shift in the narrative, promising to reveal the creature's inner world and challenge our initial perceptions. It raises an incredibly important question. Can a fiend truly be made virtuous by happiness? And is Victor capable of providing it?
Big questions.
And even more profoundly, is the creature's evil inherent, or is it a direct consequence of the cruelty and abandonment he has faced? We are about to find out how Shelley masterfully weaves the answers to these questions into the creature's own harrowing tale.
And now, for the first time, we hear the creature's lament, beginning in chapter 11, A World Awash in Sensation.
The creature's voice, finally.
The creature's narrative starts with his original era of my being, his very birth. He describes a terrifying sensory overload, darkness, then light, cold, hunger, thirst, pain, a terrifying kaleidoscope of raw input.
Imagine just existing suddenly, pure confusion.
He struggles to distinguish these sensations, gradually learning to perceive objects, the sounds of birds, and the effects of fire.
This is a truly remarkable account of primal consciousness, of a being coming into existence with a fully formed intellect, but absolutely no prior experience or knowledge of the world. His learning process is a rapid and intense immersion in the world, filtered through the lens of pure, overwhelming sensation.
Like a baby, but aware.
It's an empathetic journey into how a mind might process existence from scratch.
Then come his first human encounters. He attempts to enter a village seeking connection, only to be met with shrieks of terror, fainting, and being grievously bruised by attacks.
Immediate rejection. Brutal.
This immediate, brutal rejection fundamentally shapes his view of humanity, leading him to perceive them as embodying the barbarity of man, not kindness.
This early traumatic rejection is foundational to the creature's development. It teaches him that his appearance alone elicits fear, violence, and profound disgust, regardless of his intentions or actions.
He learns quickly, they hate me because I look like this.
He realizes he cannot exist among humans openly, so he finds refuge in a miserable hovel adjacent to a cottage, observing the world from a hidden, isolated vantage point. It's a poignant depiction of an outcast desperately seeking understanding.
In chapter 12, Learning Humanity, the creature begins to secretly observe the DeLacy family through a chink in their cottage wall.
The spy hole. His classroom.
This family consists of an old blind man, Agatha and Felix. He watches them with a quiet intensity, utterly fascinated by their interactions.
His observations are surprisingly empathetic and deeply moving. He notices their sadness and squalid poverty, despite their gentle manners and evident affection for one another.
He feels for them.
He even performs acts of secret benevolence, gathering wood, clearing snow, and providing food, driven by a nascent, pure desire to alleviate their suffering. He feels a connection to them, a budding sense of love and admiration.
The invisible helper, like a brownie or something.
Kind of, yeah. And then the godlike science, he gradually begins to understand their articulate sounds, their complex human language.
He learns to talk just by listening. Incredible.
He learns words like fire, milk, bread, wood, and crucially, their names. He experiences delight at this knowledge, which he feels enhances his superior accomplishments compared to other creatures, elevating him to a higher plane of being.
Language makes him feel powerful, connected.
This period of hidden observation is the creature's true education, his formative years. He learns about human kindness, family bonds, and the intricacies of communication. He is forming an idealized view of humanity based on the warmth and virtue he perceives in the DeLacys.
But it's an idealized view, isn't it?
Completely unaware of how society will react to him if he were to reveal himself. He's learning to love humanity from afar without having experienced its cruelty firsthand.
This profound learning continues in Chapter 13, The Mirror of Knowledge. Here's a crucial development. The arrival of Safie, an Arabian woman, Felix's sweet Safie.
The exotic stranger adds another layer.
Her angelic beauty and musical voice bring renewed joy and hope to the struggling DeLacy family, brightening their humble existence.
Safie's arrival inadvertently accelerates the creature's learning even further. By listening intently to Felix teach Safie their language, the creature learns even more rapidly, absorbing everything.
Like language immersion therapy.
This highlights his incredible intellectual capacity and his profound eagerness to connect with the human world, to bridge the gap between himself and the family he secretly adores. He's a sponge for knowledge, hoping it will lead to acceptance.
His education expands dramatically through books he finds in a portmanteau, a collection that ironically mirrors his own complex identity. Paradise Lost, Plutarch's Lives, and The Sorrows of Werther.
What a reading list for a beginner. Milton, Plutarch, Goethe.
Right. From Paradise Lost, he paradoxically sees himself as both Adam, the first created being, yet also tragically as Satan, the outcast, lamenting, "Satan had his companions, but I am solitary and abhorred."
That comparison is devastating. Created yet damned.
From Plutarch, he learns of high thoughts and heroes, of human greatness, and from Werther, he absorbs profound despondency and gloom, anticipating his own sorrows.
This self-education is a double-edged sword, a profound tragedy in itself. While it expands his mind and grants him immense understanding of human virtue and vice, it also deepens his understanding of his own profound isolation and perceived monstrousness in comparison to these idealized human figures.
Learning makes him realize how alone he is.
The comparison to Adam and Satan is particularly poignant as he feels both the burden of creation and the curse of eternal loneliness. He learns what humanity is, but only to realize what he is not, and perhaps never can be.
And here's the absolute major turning point, the moment his hopeful world truly shatters. He discovers Victor's journal tucked away in the pocket of the clothes he took from the laboratory.
The creator's own words, the ultimate betrayal.
Reading it, he finds the minutest description of my odious and loathsome person, and most painfully, Victor's horrors at his creation. This is the moment he truly understands his own hideous nature and his creator's profound disgust.
Imagine reading that, your own father figure describing you with utter revulsion.
He cries out, "Accursed creator, why did you form a monster so hideous that even you turn from me in disgust?"
This discovery of Victor's journal is a catastrophic revelation for the creature. It shatters his hopeful illusions about himself and the possibility of acceptance. He realizes his creator, the one being who should have accepted him, views him with utter loathing.
The final nail in the coffin of hope.
This agony of reflection, the horrifying realization of his profound isolation, was I then a monster, a blot upon the earth from which all men fled and whom all men disowned, is the turning point in his emotional development, transforming his innate benevolence into despair.
This is where the fiend starts to emerge.
He also laments not having a father or mother or relations like the cottagers, emphasizing his utterly unique and agonizingly lonely existence. It's the wound that defines his future actions.
In Chapter 14, The DeLacy Family's Tragedy, the creature delves deeper into the history of the DeLacy family's ruin. He learns they were once esteemed French nobility, but now live in squalid poverty because Felix, the son, tried to free Safi's father, a Turkish merchant unjustly condemned to death in Paris.
A tale of injustice and sacrifice.
This backstory profoundly humanizes the de Lacys even further for the creature, revealing their noble character, their self-sacrifice, and the depths of their suffering.
Felix's self-sacrifice, rejecting wealth for virtue and love for Safi, only increases the creature's love and reverence for my protectors. Safi's own background, as the daughter of a Christian Arab mother who valued independence of spirit and spurned the bondage of a harem, also adds to her admirable character.
So he sees their inherent goodness.
These insights into human kindness and suffering further solidify the creature's emotional attachment to them, while unknowingly setting the stage for his ultimate brutal heartbreak. He's building up hope based on their inner virtue, not realizing that his outward appearance will override everything.
Which brings us to Chapter 50, the ultimate rejection. The creature devises a meticulous plan. He will reveal himself to the blind de Lacy first,
The clever approach: avoid the visual prejudice.
hoping to gain his goodwill and mediation before the sighted children return. He shrewdly believes the old man's blindness will allow him to see beyond his monstrous appearance and judge him on his character and words.
This plan shows a remarkable degree of sophisticated reasoning, a desperate, calculated hope for acceptance. He needs to convince just one human, a compassionate one at that, to mediate for him and introduce him gently to the others.
He's banking everything on the old man's kindness.
He believes in the power of his words, of his inner goodness.
And initially it works. He has a successful, compassionate conversation with de Lacy, who expresses profound sympathy for the friendless and unfortunate. The creature is overjoyed, a brief, tantalizing glimpse of acceptance, believing his path to human connection has finally been paved.
That moment of hope. It's heartbreaking.
This moment provides a heartbreaking vision of what might have been, a world where the creature could find understanding and connection. It profoundly emphasizes that it is not his nature, but human prejudice based purely on appearance that ultimately dooms him.
But then, the devastating turning point, the shattering blow. Felix, Agatha, and Safi return.
The worst possible timing.
Their reaction is immediate, visceral horror and consternation on beholding me. Agatha faints, Safi flees, and Felix, in a primal act of protection, seizes an axe, tore me from his father's feet.
Violence, instant unthinking violence.
The creature's last fragile hope is brutally extinguished.
This is the creature's ultimate rejection, the moment his last desperate hope of human connection is violently crushed. His profound anguish and ensuing rage stem from the agonizing realization that his physical appearance will always lead to fear and rejection, overriding any inherent goodness or intellectual capacity.
He understands too late that he ought to have familiarized the old de Lacy to me, and by degrees to have discovered myself to the rest of his family when they should have been prepared for my approach. But now it was irretrievable.
No going back from this.
This final violent rejection unleashes a new, dark, and vengeful side of his nature.
And so in Chapter 16, the descent into vengeance, the creature is utterly consumed by utter and stupid despair. This despair, the culmination of relentless rejection, gives birth to pure, unadulterated malice. For the first time, the feelings of revenge and hatred filled my bosom.
The switch flips.
He no longer tries to control them, he embraces them.
This marks the definitive turning point for the creature. The benevolent, empathetic being who secretly helped the de Lacys is replaced by a creature driven by pure vengeance. His initial purity, tainted by the loathing and scorn of his former protectors, now transforms him into what he has been called a fiend.
He becomes the monster they see.
He is no longer reacting out of confusion, but out of a deliberate, chilling choice.
He unleashes his fury on inanimate objects, a symbolic act of rage, burning the de Lacy cottage to the ground. I lighted the dry branch of a tree and danced with fury around the devoted cottage, his eyes fixed on the moon.
A powerful, destructive image.
He then embarks on long travels, living in the harshest conditions, enduring cold, famine, thirst, and want of sleep.
This destructive act is symbolic of his broken spirit, mirroring the destruction he has experienced not just at the hands of humans, but from the initial abandonment by his creator. Despite this, he mentions fleeting feelings of gentleness and pleasure, revived by the coming in spring near Geneva.
So the goodness isn't totally gone.
Indicating that his capacity for good isn't entirely extinguished, but it is deeply buried beneath layers of resentment and pain. It's a glimmer of the creature he could have been, if only he'd been given a chance.
But then the horrifying escalation of his malice, the cruel turning point of William's murder. The creature sees William a beautiful child. His initial, almost benevolent thought is to educate him, to mold him into a companion,
A last flicker of that desire for connection.
someone who might accept him. But when William, terrified, screams, "Frankenstein! You belong then to my enemy," the creature's fragile hope snaps. He strangles the child, declaring, "You shall be my first victim."
This is a truly calculated act of malice, a direct, brutal attack on Victor enacted through his loved ones. The child's innocent mention of the name Frankenstein triggers the creature's deepest resentment and thirst for vengeance.
It's personal now, deeply personal.
It's not a random act of violence. It's a precise, devastating strike against the man who created and then abandoned him. The creature has learned to wound where it hurts most.
And the cruelest, most calculated twist, he discovers the miniature of Caroline, Victor's mother, on William and deliberately plants it on Justine Moritz,
Framing the innocent, pure malice.
reasoning that she would be despised by her pretended friends and suffer for it. This act of framing an innocent marks a clear, chilling shift to cold, calculated malice, turning an innocent victim into a scapegoat purely for vengeance. He has truly become a fiend here.
This is where the creature truly embraces the role Victor's rejection pushed him into, using his intelligence not for connection, but to inflict psychological torture as well as physical harm. He is fully aware of the consequences of his actions and embraces his role as an agent of misery and injustice.
He's weaponizing his intellect now.
He is no longer simply reacting. He is actively planning and inflicting suffering, becoming the monster Victor always feared he would be.
In Chapter 7, the creature continues his demand for a female companion from Victor.
The infamous demand.
He justifies it by saying he needs to escape his forced solitude to feel sympathy, and that with a mate he would become harmless and retreat from human society. He promises to live in the vast wilds of South America and never interact with humans again. He makes a compelling, if desperate, case.
This demand is central to the creature's narrative and his plea for understanding, or at least a cessation of his torment. He argues that his malice is a direct product of his misery and isolation, and that companionship would restore his virtues.
Make me happy and I'll be good again.
He attempts to reason with Victor, stating, "I am malicious because I am miserable." He promises a life of simplicity, content with acorns and berries, a retreat from the world. This raises a crucial, lingering question. Is he truly capable of such a transformation, or is this a manipulative plea born of his deep cunning?
Can we trust him? Can Victor trust him?
Exactly. Victor, initially horrified and steadfastly refusing, eventually consents. He is swayed by the creature's arguments, and perhaps more profoundly, by a growing sense of Creator's unfulfilled duty, a moral obligation he can no longer ignore.
He gives in, reluctantly.
But his decision is still filled with horror and hatred for the filthy mass he is about to create. He extracts a solemn promise from the creature: perpetual seclusion from mankind for both of them.
A very fragile truce.
This agreement is incredibly fraught with tension. Victor feels a moral obligation as creator, a weight of responsibility, but also profound revulsion. The promise of seclusion offers a desperate hope for peace, a potential end to the cycle of violence, but the underlying hatred Victor feels suggests it's a fragile, perhaps doomed pact.
He's trying to fix it, but his heart's not in it.
He's trying to mitigate a disaster he unleashed, but his heart isn't truly in it.
And so, we move to Part 4, the unavoidable catastrophe and final vows, starting with Chapter 8, a fateful journey to England. Victor returns to Geneva, but despite his agreement, he's unable to bring himself to actually start the new creation.
Procrastination born of dread.
The repugnance is too great. His father notices Victor's deepening melancholy and subtly misinterprets it as reluctance towards marrying Elizabeth.
Thinking it's just wedding jitters, if only.
Believing his son is simply unhappy about the impending union. This highlights a persistent communication breakdown within the family, as Victor is burdened by a terrible secret he feels he cannot possibly share, further isolating him in his suffering.
Victor's internal torment is immense. He feels bound by his solemn promise to the creature, recognizing it as his only path to ending the violence. But he also fears manifold miseries if he breaks it, knowing the creature's capacity for vengeance.
Damned if he does, damned if he doesn't.
He convinces himself he must fulfill the promise before marrying Elizabeth, believing he cannot enter into the festival of marriage with this deadly weight yet hanging around my neck. It's a twisted logic, driven by fear.
Gotta finish this horrible task before I can be happy. which seems unlikely.
This decision is driven by a warped sense of duty and a desperate, almost pathetic attempt to regain control over his life and the horrors he unleashed. He decides to travel to England for the necessary scientific knowledge, with Henry Clerval accompanying him.
Bringing Clerval along, maybe for moral support.
He even sees Clerval as a shield, hoping his friend's presence will somehow deter the creature from further violence, a deeply ironic and tragically misplaced hope.
In Chapter 19, The Shadow of the Task, Victor and Clerval embark on their travels through England and Scotland, ostensibly enjoying the scenery, the Thames, Oxford, Matlock, the Cumberland Lakes.
A grand tour under a dark cloud.
For Clerval, it's a journey of delight and instruction, as he pursues his own noble ambition to visit India and learn Oriental languages.
But for Victor, his underlying despair is ever present, a constant dark cloud. He finds company irksome, constantly burdened by his abhorred task.
Can't enjoy anything.
Even in the most beautiful, picturesque surroundings, his mind is consumed by his secret, his impending, loathsome duty. It showcases how deeply entrenched his suffering has become, overshadowing any possibility of joy or peace.
He eventually secures a remote spot of Scotland, a desolate island in the Orkneys, to finish his work in complete solitude.
Back to isolation. Hasn't he learned anything?
He isolates himself once more, allowing the true horrors of his task to consume him without distraction, repeating the very pattern that led to his first disaster.
This isolation is a critical element, directly mirroring the creature's own enforced solitude and his own initial creative hubris. It shows that Victor, despite his good intentions and sense of duty, is tragically repeating patterns of behavior withdrawal, secrecy, obsessive labor that invariably lead to misery.
He's trapped in this cycle.
He is also described as being in a state of slavery, highlighting the immense burden of his promise and the psychological cost of his creation.
Then comes Chapter Airy X, Hopes Crushed. Victor begins the creation of the female, but this time he's filled with renewed horror and irksomeness at the filthy process.
No enthusiasm this time, just duty and disgust.
This isn't the youthful fervor of his first creation, it's a torturous obligation.
This time he's not driven by enthusiastic frenzy, but works in cold blood with profound reluctance. He's acutely aware of the repugnance of his work, and his heart sickens at the thought of repeating his past mistakes. He's seeing the grim reality, not the glorious vision.
Here is a major turning point, a profound moral awakening. Victor reflects deeply on the effects of what I was now doing.
Finally thinking it through.
He considers the horrifying possibility of the female creature being 10,000 times more malignant than the first, their potential reproduction, and the terrifying idea of cursing everlasting generations.
A race of monsters. The implications are huge.
He shudders at the thought of buying his own peace at the price of the existence of the whole human race.
This moment represents a crucial, albeit tragically late, moral awakening for Victor. He finally grasps the full, terrifying scope of his potential culpability, moving beyond his personal suffering to consider the catastrophic implications for all humanity.
He sees the bigger picture, finally.
This newfound foresight, this realization of the potential global impact of his actions, is what finally gives him the strength to defy the creature.
And in that moment of horrifying clarity, the ultimate act of defiant destruction, he sees the creature watching him through the window, that familiar yellow eye.
Peering in, always watching.
Enraged by this silent surveillance and terrified by his own reflections, Victor tears the unfinished female creature to pieces. He destroys his work, but in doing so, he seals his own fate.
This dramatic destruction is an act of desperate rebellion against his own fate and the creature's relentless demands. But it immediately violently provokes the creature, leading to another devastating escalation in their tragic conflict.
He breaks the deal. Big mistake.
Victor thinks he's ending the cycle, but he's merely pushing it to a new, more personal, and far more brutal phase.
The monster's retaliation is swift and terrifying. The creature's enraged reaction, his gnashing teeth, and his chilling, prophetic threat. I will be with you on your wedding night.
Ominous. Chilling. The most famous line, maybe?
It's a vow of reciprocal suffering, a curse that hangs heavy in the air.
This is a direct, visceral threat, a declaration of all-consuming vengeance. It transforms the creature from a supplicant into a full-fledged, vengeful demon, fully embracing the role Victor's actions have forced upon him.
No more negotiations.
Victor, overwhelmed by despair, then casts the remains of the female creature into the sea and falls asleep in his boat, only to awaken and find himself driven far off course, adrift and disoriented.
He lands in Ireland, which leads to Chapter 21, accused of murder. Victor is immediately arrested upon landing, accused of murder.
Out of the frying pan.
He's brought before Magistrate Kerwin, a seemingly benevolent figure who nonetheless looks upon him with severity, convinced of his guilt.
The witness testimony describes a strangled body, and when the mark of fingers is mentioned, Victor's limbs tremble, and a mist comes over his eyes, causing the magistrate to draw an unfavorable augury.
He knows. He knows who did it.
This is an immediate test of his sanity and his incredible, unbelievable story, which he cannot reveal for fear of being deemed insane. He's trapped by his secret.
And then the true, agonizing revelation. He's led to the room where the body lay for interment, and he discovers it is Henry Clerval.
Oh God, not Clerval.
Victor is completely shattered. Have my murderous machinations deprived you also, my dearest Henry, of life? 2 I have already destroyed. Other victims await their destiny. The horror of his responsibility crushes him.
This is the ultimate personal cost of Victor's actions, the deepest wound to his spirit. Henry, his kind, loyal, and innocent friend, is the latest victim, demonstrating the creature's escalating vengeance and its calculated cruelty.
The monster knew exactly how to hurt Victor the most.
Victor's subsequent 2-month nervous fever, during which he raves incessantly about being the murderer of William Justine and now Clerval, highlights his complete mental breakdown. Fortunately, Magistrate Kerwin, hearing him rave in his native language, interprets it as delirium rather than a confession, saving him from immediate conviction.
Lucky breaking away.
He is eventually acquitted because it's proven he was on the Orkney Islands at the time of Clerval's death, establishing an alibi.
Yeah.
But the emotional damage is profound and irreversible.
This acquittal offers Victor no comfort whatsoever. His guilt is internal, a festering wound that no legal verdict can heal. He grapples with the terrifying reality that he is the ultimate cause of so much suffering, even if he isn't legally culpable for Henry's death.
He describes himself as a shattered wreck, a mere skeleton, utterly broken by his experiences.
In Chapter 22, The Wedding Night Foretold, Victor returns to Paris and then Geneva, still absorbed by a profound, gloomy, and black melancholy.
This is going through the motions now.
Elizabeth grows increasingly concerned, desperately trying to understand his secret, subtly hinting at his continued sorrow and distance.
Elizabeth's unwavering affection and concern are incredibly poignant against Victor's internal torment. She tries to draw him out of his fits of despair, but his guilt is too profound, his secret too terrible to share.
He can't tell her. He has to protect her, he thinks.
He feels he has no right to share in their joy, believing he has unchained an enemy among them, one that threatens everything he holds dear.
Then comes the ghastly premonition, the chilling realization. Victor suddenly recalls the creature's ominous threat, "I will be with you on your wedding night."
It clicks. Or he thinks it clicks.
This recollection is a moment of terrifying clarity for Victor, but tragically, he fundamentally misinterprets it.
Oh, this is the worst part.
He wrongly believes it to be a threat against his own life, convinced the creature means to kill him.
He thinks the monster wants him. How wrong he is.
He decides to marry Elizabeth, convinced he must face the creature head-on, seeing his own death as a release from his unbearable suffering. He hides his true fears from Elizabeth, tragically preventing her from taking precautions or fleeing. This misinterpretation is the final, fatal error.
This fatal misinterpretation leads directly to Chapter 23, the ultimate horror. The wedding day arrives, bathed in a false sense of peace, but Elizabeth is melancholic, filled with a deep, unsettling presentiment of evil.
She senses something is wrong, deeply wrong.
Her intuition, though unspoken, highlights the underlying tension and the almost inevitable doom hanging over them.
Victor's anxiety escalates to a fever pitch as night falls. He, armed with a pistol, sends Elizabeth to her room, then patrols the inn, expecting the creature to attack him.
He's preparing for his own death match.
He's prepared for his own death, perhaps even desiring it as an end to his misery, convinced he's the target. This mistaken expectation sets the stage for the final, devastating blow. Victor's singular focus on himself, his own suffering, tragically blinds him to the creature's deeper, far more vengeful motives.
And then, the final, utterly devastating turning point. He hears a shrill and dreadful scream from Elizabeth's room.
The scream! Oh no!
The horrible, soul-crushing realization rushes into his mind. The creature's threat was against Elizabeth, not him. The creature has found his ultimate, most painful form of revenge.
This is the creature's ultimate act of vengeance, striking at Victor's last remaining source of happiness, his very last connection to a life of love and normalcy. It's a calculated, brutal blow that ensures Victor's life will be a living hell, a permanent state of torment.
He rushes in to find Elizabeth dead, strangled, and sees the creature at the window, grinning in triumph, a demonic visage in the darkness.
Grin, pure evil.
Victor attempts to shoot the creature, who easily jumps into the lake and disappears, leaving Victor with only the horrifying aftermath.
This scene is the culmination of the creature's descent into pure malice and Victor's complete ruin. Victor's subsequent mental breakdown and his father's death from grief upon hearing the news leave him utterly, irrevocably alone.
Everyone is gone. Everything lost.
Victor is then imprisoned, thought to be mad, his desperate ravings about the monster dismissed as delirium, sealing his isolation.
Which brings us to chapter 24, the relentless pursuit and final vows. Victor is eventually released from prison, now driven solely by an all-consuming desire for revenge.
Nothing left but vengeance.
He makes a desperate, futile plea to the Geneva magistrate to pursue the creature, to warn the world, but his incredible story is dismissed as delirium from a shattered mind.
No one believes him. He's truly alone.
Victor's isolation is now complete and absolute. No one believes his incredible tale. No one can help him, leaving him with no recourse but to take matters into his own hands. He makes a solemn, desperate vow to dedicate his remaining life, or even his death, to the creature's utter destruction. His existence now has but one singular purpose: vengeance.
And thus begins his relentless, months-long pursuit, a grueling odyssey across Russia and Tartary, through vast, desolate landscapes that mirror his own inner emptiness.
A chase across the world, creator hunting creation.
The creature, in a twisted, sadistic game of cat and mouse, often leaves clues messages etched on trees or stones to keep Victor engaged, fueled by fury, just within reach but never quite captured.
This pursuit is fueled by a burning desire for vengeance, yes, but also by a strange, dark, symbiotic relationship that is developed between creator and creation.
They need each other now, in a horrible way.
Victor's dreams of Elizabeth and his lost friends, where he sees them happy and alive, are what sustain him through the unimaginable hardships, providing a fleeting, almost cruel solace in his relentless hunt.
The chase culminates inevitably in the barren, unforgiving landscape of the Arctic, where Victor finally gains on the creature, his ultimate prize within sight.
Back to the ice, full circle.
But in a final stroke of cruel irony, the ice breaks apart, leaving Victor adrift and near death, mirroring the creature's earlier escape, bringing the narrative full circle.
His rescue by Robert Walton's ship brings us back to the framing device established at the very beginning of the novel. Victor, on his deathbed, makes a final, desperate request to Walton to continue his assigned task of destroying the creature, as it is a duty to mankind.
Passing the torch, or the curse.
He warns Walton passionately against the creature's eloquence and persuasion, recognizing its power to manipulate, even in its profound suffering.
Don't listen to him, he'll trick you.
And that leads us to part 5. The creature's final confession and the end, revealed through Walton's continuation of his journal entries, acting as our final, somber witness.
Walton gets the last word. Sort of.
Walton details Victor's rapid decline and his last, fervent pleas for Walton to continue the hunt, to finish what he could not.
Here we encounter a poignant, almost inevitable, final turning point. The crew on Walton's ship nears mutiny, demanding to turn back south due to the extreme cold and overwhelming danger.
Reality sets in for the crew. This isn't worth dying for.
Victor, despite his profound weakness, delivers a passionate yet ultimately ineffective speech, urging them to press on for glory, echoing his own lifelong pursuit. Walton, facing the stark reality of the situation and the crew's despair, consents to their demands, valuing their lives over Victor's dying wish.
Walton makes the sensible choice. Unlike Victor.
Victor Frankenstein finally dies, his last breath a gentle smile. He finds a semblance of peace, released at last from his unbearable torment, his obsession finally at an end.
But the story isn't quite over. In a dramatic, almost ghostly appearance, the creature enters Walton's cabin, standing over Victor's corpse.
He comes back for the final scene.
He expresses wild and incoherent self-reproaches, a torrent of grief and guilt, lamenting Victor's death, admitting his crimes are consummated, that his vengeance is complete.
Does he feel remorse? Or just emptiness?
He finally explains his malice, directly addressing Walton. Misery made me a fiend. He asserts that his profound suffering, born from the violence of the change from benevolent and innocent to hateful and vengeful, was far greater than Victor's.
My suffering was worse than yours.
He speaks of his bitter envy of Victor's happiness, his connections, which drove his most vengeful acts.
He describes himself as a malignant devil, degraded beneath the meanest animal, admitting he has murdered the lovely and the helpless and strangled the innocent. He expresses deep, agonizing self-hatred. You hate me, but your abhorrence cannot equal that with which I regard myself.
A truly devastating self-assessment. He knows what he became.
He longs for the moment when his hands will meet my eyes, to consume to ashes this miserable frame. He desires to erase himself from existence, a final horrifying act of self-condemnation.
His purpose, he declares, is now fulfilled with Victor's death. He vows to immolate himself at the most northern extremity of the globe, a fiery, solitary end,
A funeral pyre at the top of the world.
leaving no light to any curious and unhallowed wretch who would create such another as I have been. It's his final, desperate attempt to prevent humanity from repeating Victor's tragic mistake.
His last act is a warning.
This final confession is both horrifying in its admissions and deeply poignant in its raw emotion. The creature, a being capable of immense suffering and profound thought, recognizes his own evil, but frames it as a direct, tragic consequence of the injustice and abandonment he faced from his creator and from society.
Nature versus nurture, writ large and monstrous.
His ultimate act of self-destruction is a final, desperate attempt to prevent future horrors, an end to his own unbearable torment, and to deny any unhallowed wretch the blueprint for his own tragic existence. It's an act of profound despair, and perhaps the only true act of agency he has left.
And with that chilling vow, the creature takes his final leap from the cabin window onto the ice raft, disappearing into the darkness, leaving us to ponder the profound questions raised by this extraordinary story. And there you have it. Thanks for spending a little bit of your day with us and this story. If you enjoyed it, a simple like or subscribe helps the channel out more than you know.
It really does.
Before we go, consider this. Frankenstein asks us to confront not just the monsters we create, but the monsters we become when we fail in our responsibilities, when we reject what we don't understand, and when unchecked ambition blinds us to the human cost.
It's a timeless warning, really.
It's a powerful reminder that our greatest creations can become our greatest curses, not because of what they are, but because of what we make them. Until next time, be well.